Oh,
Hello.
hey there.
Hey.
How are you?
Thanks for coming out, everybody. Appreciate it.
Yeah, this Cajun here. Thank you guys so much for doing this with us. This is our first Skype Q&A in Woodbridge. We just opened a few months ago. So we're honored for this to be our first. Before today, before the last few months, I don't know if Woodbridge would have been afforded this opportunity. So I think I speak for all of us when I say we really appreciate it.
Of course, it's our hometown, Alamo. We're from Alexandria, so.
Oh, awesome. I don't know if we have any questions. That was so clear cut. And we're certainly in the Christmas spirit now.
The head explodes at the end, and it's all tied up real nicely in a ribbon for you.
Guys, did anybody have any questions they want to kind of shoot off? If you want to, raise your hand and speak a little loudly, or can I come down to the front, right in front of the computer? Either way, so Jeremy can see you.
That's okay. I can talk loud enough. I was just wondering what your inspiration was. Like, how did you come into the thought process for filming this and writing it?
Well, I had done a few dark films before this, and I was not looking for more darkness, but my friend and collaborator, Macon Blair, again, he's another Alexandrian, he sort of came up with me making movies. He found this novel, and it was just so singular and bizarre and surreal, and something that he wanted to tackle as a writer, and thought he could really custom build it for me. Because my house is so warm and full of love, I like to be transported, and I do gravitate towards very aggressive filmmaking. Close that door in 1 second. But I'm also from the indie world, and I've written my past 3 movies, and it's always with a budget ceiling in mind, so I can get the credit card out or do a Kickstarter campaign, whatever I have to do. If I'm not allowed to make it by the powers that be, then I just do it myself, and I go broke, and I mortgage my house. But this was far beyond the scale I was used to working at, and offered an opportunity to do so many firsts for me. And it is very aggressive and kinetic, but meditative as well, and surreal, and that was new territory for me. And it was, to me, it was just a sweet gig. And I found a way into it emotionally to kind of explore the darkness and keep it sort of ambiguous and more of an experience and an exercise in immersing people. If they're transported on a bizarre journey in this sort of frozen tundra, then I hope they just feel the relief, if not elation, of just surviving.
What was the book that you mentioned?
Hold the Dark. This is an adaptation straight from the novel.
And just because you started, I guess, to touch on a little bit, like the freedom you had with this project, I want to talk more about the film than I do, the way in which it was released on Netflix and all that stuff. But I guess I'm curious, with the Netflix model, did that afford you a little bit more freedom or flexibility? And what was the pros and cons of that release pattern and whatnot?
Well, it is very rare for a filmmaker like myself to scale up exponentially in budget, but also do something way more weird and not unconventional, and that's just something I couldn't pass up. Netflix does not have, so the way people fund movies, it's very complicated, but to simplify it is a lot of financiers, they put together a package, this good script, they hire a director they think is right for the material, and it's all about the cast. And the cast, whether or not they're the best cast that would fill the roles the best and perform the best and have the best chemistry on screen, they pre-assign value to famous movie stars. And so they put the financing together by saying actor A and actor C and actor F they're gonna make us this much money, and we estimate we'll make $12 million in foreign pre-sales. They're gonna just give you a poster and the cast. They're going to go across to these film markets and pre-sell and say, we're going to give you this movie, but you got to give us just $2 million of the budget, and then you can release it in France or Germany. So it's very complicated, but it ends up being, they want the same people in every movie because all the foreign sales projections are based on older movies or famous movie stars that have done well in certain movies. in certain box office numbers. Netflix needs a whole wide variety of content. They need these big, crazy sci-fi blockbusters. They need really kind of heartfelt rom-coms, and apparently they need esoteric, ice metal, bizarro journey, western horror, adventure movies, just as a complement to their huge slate. So we get total freedom to cast actors that wouldn't otherwise be able to be in a sort of $15 million action epic. So it was a very freeing model, and it was right for the film because no one else was crazy enough to make this.
That's a good answer. That sounds awesome. Did anybody else?
I had a few questions. Hey, Jeremy, huge fan. Green Room is probably my second favorite movie of all time.
Oh, wow.
So I just wanted to ask about kind of, I think like from the book to the film, it seems like you kind of shifted the focus to be entirely like from Cora's perspective, where I think the book was a little bit like it shifted between the characters like Miriam and others. Why did you choose to have Cora at the shootout in the film? And
go ahead.
Yeah, just like what made you choose to have him there instead of like,
Yeah, we did think we needed, one central character, but I think the whole goal when adapting a novel, again, this is my first time doing so my goal rather was to just be true to the material and to make the reading experience translate the one that I had, at least when I first flipped through the pages and was just electrified by how unpredictable and bizarre this was, and the atmosphere it contained. Transfer that to the film-going audience. But I think, traditionally, from a novel point of view, from a literary point of view, it is a very, very much a bisected narrative. It's mostly you have Cora over here and you have Sloane over here, and they have less interaction than they do in the movie. But I think to even a normal moviegoer who has not seen the source material will still find it quite odd how it's still quite, bisected as far as narrative. It's not as clean. So we were just trying to do a little nudge where we still have these amazing exchanges that are peripheral to Cora that he's not there to witness. But the shootout, Macon engineered that so Cora wouldn't do much as far as interference in what transpired in that scene, but we could really see it through his eyes because we couldn't leave. Because in the novel, this shootout transpires and Cora is sick in bed for about 2 weeks, and he's just kind of sniffling and hanging out in a hotel room, and that just didn't play on screen. So we still have that. Cora is still sniffling in a hotel room, but he has this call to action, and he has this revelation about, maybe this old woman might know something because she did mention something, and puts two and two together, goes to the village. He's there to witness it, and we had to incorporate him somehow. I thought Macon did a great job of, he's passive throughout, and this nice moment where he saves Arnie, then it still resolves with Chion and Miriam. I know it's just because we just couldn't have our dude hanging out doing nothing. That just would fly.
Did you have a second part as well?
Well, yeah, on that same note, I guess, you answered like a tweet of mine yesterday. So you answered like part of the question where you said why you didn't kind of spell everything out. And I think you've answered like numerous times, but did you actually film the final chapter in the book? And just like, is that on film anywhere? Or did you just leave it out? Like, did you capture it?
As far as when the Sloanes take Bailey off into the skin tundra, No, the ending is it's troublesome. It's somewhat vexing to people, and I get that. To me, it's because my tendency as a filmmaker when I write is to kind of in an odd way. I get there in very odd ways, but I like to wrap things up, and it usually means on-screen death. But this was just a really cool turn, and even like some of my inner urges were to normalize it and to make it a regular movie ending. So we kept it pretty much as is as far as the essence of it, where there's this really kind of odd reunion between Sloane and Medora, and whether his vengeance, his mission just he kind of melts in front of her, and you feel that sort of that wolf pack vibe come out, and just a surprising turn where it's just forgiveness and an animal connection, and that you cannot, no more further savaging of the pack. And then we had to kind of stick with core, because if we were to then leave with Medora and Sloan and hang out with them for a bit, again, it just didn't translate. The movie had to wrap up. It wasn't a clean resolution, but we felt like, once we feel the momentum shift and Core's there and he beholds the wolves on the cliff, that was where like there was a nice tit for tat where Core had spared the wolves and now the wolves are sparing Core, and just now we have to get out of it. We have to get out of here and still have this, this trippy kind of sequence where he's being nursed back to health, and it's kind of this fever dream, but then, get him back to where he needs to be as soon as possible and stay with him.
Cool.
Question.
Yeah.
How much does because I've kind of noticed this trend with Netflix movies where it's almost like they leave the ending almost open-ended. How much influence do Netflix executives have in terms of dictating movie direction or storyline?
Well, no, that geared more towards like a series where they want to do another one. We all think this is sort of a singular piece and wouldn't want to revisit it. But it's true to the novel, and that's it, more or less. But Netflix is really, because they don't have to live and die by the same business model, which is far more brutal. They can be way more adventurous. Again, it doesn't need to please everybody. It can find its niche audience on their platform. I'm not sponsored by Netflix. But I am, for this movie, very loyal to them because they put their money where their mouth is, and like others did not. They gave a lot of notes during the editorial process and a lot of support. And for me, it was great because I needed help navigating this literary adaptation. It wasn't my own. I didn't know every word. I didn't know the origin of every line and every beat in the story because it was a novelist and then a screenwriter and then me. So I looked to all my collaborators, and I had to certainly dig in and find the one path that I felt was right and defend certain scenes from being cut, even expanding them, and then trying, whatever cuts I could make, and some of that stayed on the cutting room floor. But the cool thing about Netflix, with all their notes and their interest towards making the best possible product, is none of them were mandated at all. And that gives you a huge, okay, so you can entertain these ideas, you can cross these 5 off because you just know it's not that kind of movie, and say, well, I felt the exact same thing the first time I watched the rough cut, so let me go down that road. So it's cool because you're forced to really defend the movie, and I think we ended up with the best possible version of it, given the substantial nature of the literary work we were adapting.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, how'd you go about casting? Because I thought Alexander Skarsgård and Jeffrey Wright were really good choices. But did you guys have anyone else in mind for those 2 roles?
Well, no. There was a version of this movie that didn't happen, and I'm really grateful. I actually killed it. We had a greenlit project, full funding, a little less money, but still a green light. It was going to be in New Zealand, in the southern hemisphere, when winter is in July. But it just felt not right because all these restraints kept popping up, and the way I make movies is very much, in camera, like no green screens, all practical effects and design and scenic and painting and building sets, whatever it is, smoke, atmosphere, blood, guts, whatever. I want to do it live with a real crew that can get their hands dirty. Oh wait, hold on. What was the question again?
How'd you go about casting?
Yeah. So I killed that version of the movie because in New Zealand they wouldn't allow real wolves. There's a quarantine. They're not indigenous to that part of the world. and that meant like CG wolves and what have you, or really bad composite work. So I killed it and scrapped it, and we went to Netflix, and that's where, yeah, I mean, instead of giving you the foreign sales estimates and you can cast any one of these 4 people in your movie, they ask the filmmakers, well, who do you want in the movie? Who do you want to see in this role? So from that point on, it was, I want Jeffrey Wright, I want Alexander Skarsgård. It was kind of all first choices, which is very rare. We found the gentleman who plays Cheon. His name is Julian Black Antelope, and he worked locally in Alberta, in Calgary, where we shot the movie, and just found him. He auditioned for the role and blew us away, and he just happened to do his own stunts too, which is crazy. But the whole cast was, I vet for not only chemistry and how do we do this and put it together the right way so it just feels right, but I also vet them for, do I feel true enthusiasm? Because this is not your everyday movie, and they had to get it, and they had to want to do it and go through great pains to realize this, this very atmospheric film and often wordless film. And what's cool is that, I mean, so far in my career, which is still beginning, it's just getting off the ground, I have not encountered an ensemble of people who are jerks. It's really important to me, as when you make movies, that it's hard enough as it is. 16-hour days are standard, and it's negative 30 degrees Celsius. You want to be around people that aren't pricks.
You mentioned like a bunch of cutscenes. Are we ever going to get like a Blu-ray with any of those on there? And which one of those cutscenes did you apologize to Alex Skarsgård about?
Oh wait, which one did I? Probably one I tried to cut. I'm not like a big fan of flashbacks, so I tried to get them all out, which was a good exercise, because then I realized, well, some of them are really important to have in there. And not for, one is for like a plot reveal, some kind of, the revelation where Medora is in the cave. But the important one for me was Vernon Sloan and his boy Bailey, years ago, having that conversation by the side of the water. There was one scene that had to do with a drifter and the mythology of, or the origin story of the mask that was on Medora's mantle. It didn't seem like the same movie. Maybe I veered a little more towards the horror genre, got a little slasher movie in there. There's certainly iconography from horror films, and I think it has an undercurrent of folk horror, but this was just, fucking Friday the 13th. Didn't quite work. It was also, the movie had to have a certain tone, and more exposition and more explanation, actually, it buckled under its own weight. Like, this movie is about tone and atmosphere, and that undercurrent that we're trying to build is not about answers or tidy reasoning or character motivation. So when we try to explain things too much, they lost their mystery and their power. And there won't be a Blu-ray, as far as I know. That's one of the trade-offs. Is basically, I made the choice to partner with Netflix, and with the creative freedom and the risk-taking that they can do, I'm just happy. I'm happy to be in theaters. Like, we just announced this theatrical run like a week before it happened. So it's a last-minute thing. I really appreciate you guys coming out, by the way, because it is currently on Netflix right there waiting for you.
Yeah, thank you. I think we're 1 of 6 or something. So yeah, this is awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm just happy that that this movie got made and it has a home. And I mean, it is getting to millions of people. And we'll see as Netflix evolves and I evolve. I don't know where my films are going to be, but as long as I can keep making them, I'm good to go.
How hard was it to connect with Netflix, and I mean, how they picked you up? Because you said you were an indie director, right?
Oh, well, I had a track record. My first movie was a horror comedy called Murder Party, and that was like pseudo success in that we only lost $70,000 on the movie and didn't get distribution. So your first movie getting anyone that wants to put it out is like a huge coup. So we were excited, but it was self-funded, and it took 6 years to recover from that. And then I was working as a camera person and trying to figure out how to make movies. And I always stayed close to the industry. I worked in advertising and photography. I was a cinematographer for other directors. But I did another film in 2012. I shot it. It premiered in 2013 and was released in 2014, called Blue Ruin, and that was my breakthrough movie. And that, premiered at the Director's Fortnight Sidebar at the Cannes Film Festival. And it was luckily one of the few American independent films for a sale, so it sold the very night of its premiere and got a lot of attention. It was very overwhelming, but after like 16 years of trying to break through, then all of a sudden, Macon and myself were on the map. And once you have access to Hollywood agents and studios are just kind of interested in trying to, harvest new talent, it's a lot easier. And I made Green Room right away because I was just terrified. I was like, someone's going to figure out that I'm a fraud, and I got to just keep going in this crazy movie that no one's going to fund. I found some people who were crazy enough to fund that, and just kind of sprinted all the way through before I had a chance to fail miserably. So after Blue Ruin and Green Room, I was indeed on the map. That also premiered at Director's Fortnight in Cannes and did Sundance in Toronto. So I had 2 films in a row with really good festival track records. So then you're kind of on the radar. And Netflix had done Macon Blair's film. Macon Blair wrote the adaptation. His movie had just done Sundance and won the festival the year before. So we had mutual friends. And, again, I had no access to the industry. I was sitting there in Alexandria. I went to NYU Film School, graduated, still had no access to the film industry. And it wasn't until I sort of paid for 2 movies and mortgaged my house twice did I finally get that luck where somebody programmed me in a really prestigious festival. And then it was easy. Now it's easy. We'll see going forward. I've got plans. If I ever get in director's jail and I'm not hireable, I will do another Kickstarter campaign. I'll write a super cheap movie and fund it myself because I'm just, very excited to be able to tell stories and will not stop. Damn it.
Was there any character in this film that, in particular, you and Macon related to a little bit more than another? Or were
Definitely.
any of them informed a little bit by your voice? Yeah, right.
No, yeah, Miriam is like a really grounded character, and I think a lot of people really kind of latch onto him as, the most normalizing force in the movie. And Core is a sort of broken husk of a man. Definitely related to him, as far as him as a father. That scene at him, with him and Miriam and his wife at dinner, talking about Core's failings as a father, spoke directly to my fears as a father, because I am, when I make a film, I'm gone between 4 and 6 months out of the year. The family does come to visit, but it's all schools and scheduling, so you can get that terrible feeling that you're going to have that conversation when you're 58 that you were indeed not there for your children. But as a filmmaker, those are sort of like Core is our protagonist. He's sort of our eyes into this world. But you also have to really sympathize and be able to switch gears to everybody. So for Cheon, he does an absolutely terrible thing, but to make that scene come alive, to infuse it with that passion and sort of nihilistic rage, you have to sympathize with him too, as much as Miriam. You just bounce back and forth, so you're really letting the audience feel true dramatic conflict, and you're making a case for everyone. Even Vernon Sloan was a bit different in that we weren't going for really like a PTSD, war veteran thing. It was supposed to be as if there was always Vernon Sloan, there always will be Vernon Sloan, and the way we shot the Iraq war sequences were just him very sort of close and personal, and the war became the background, and he's just carving through it, and of course, living by his own code. He does not follow the rules of the U.S. government or the local laws, whatever they might be. It's just him and his own governance. But yeah, so you gotta kind of wear all the hats and play every role when you're doing something like this.
Anybody else? No? I guess I have one more, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no problem.
And we'll wrap it up shortly, just in a couple of minutes or so. But I'm curious, like, you know, you talk about your family, and I know you've come a long way since your first film. Has time or age done anything to you in the way that you treat violence on screen?
Oh, sure. I mean, that certainly was the whole, you know, Blue Ruin is this kind of stark revenge movie. And it's about, you know, in many ways, the revenge fantasy, the American revenge fantasy that you see in so many movies, just being executed, no pun intended, by someone like ourselves. Like, you know, what if I was writing it? It flowed out so naturally because I was like, well, what if I indulged in one of these revenge fantasies? What if my rage propelled me to this mission to kill? What would I do? How does one get a gun? How does one flail through this? And I just let it be as real as I could. And it was this awful, inept protagonist flailing his way through that very cinematic standard scenario. Oh wait, shit. What was the question again?
I guess I was just wondering, maybe with kind of the passing of time, if the way in which you treat violence
sorry.
may be different than it used to be, or
Yeah. So that was it. It's like I like kick-ass genre flicks. I love horror movies and I love action movies. And I had fun with that. I got no problems with on-screen violence. I have a huge problem with non-fiction violence, and I loathe it, and I want to shelter myself from it. But a John Woo sequence is choreography, it's beauty, and it's action, and it's cinema. It's great. But when I was writing this revenge movie, Blue Ruin, that's when I did have a transition where I couldn't shield it all out. I couldn't move forward and just kick ass and take names. I still like the impact and the heightened experience of having our protagonists in peril and the threat of death and sometimes actual death. It's just a compelling way to transport me from my very warm home environment with my loving family. I like to be scared. It's really fun when a film can elicit an involuntary response from you in the theater. It's fantastic. So Blue Ruin was about me coping with too much, because there was, now it's every other month, but too many mass shootings. The way I feel when I'm editing an action sequence, when we were doing this insane massacre in Hold the Dark, Las Vegas, that just happened a week prior when we did a rough cut screening. And I sent out a warning. I was like, look, if you don't have to come, give me notes if you don't want to. There's something really terrible in this movie, and if it's too close to what just happened, just walk away. So it's an ongoing thing, and I'm never going to figure it out. What I do want to continue doing is just making that sort of films at a visceral level, and not overthink it and not politicize it too much. Because fiction for me is a safe haven, even though I like a very dangerous setting. And so I do, if I ever do think it over too much and figure it out, then I'll lose whatever schizophrenic edge that I might have in my filmmaking. So who knows?
Yeah, I was gonna say it's funny that you said that, because right before we started this, I said that it reminded me of the Las Vegas shooting, because I don't know, a couple weeks ago I just was looking up information about it because the anniversary's coming up, and when you're watching the video or videos of that, the sound is the same. The shots fired and everything. It's I could just hear the clicking in my head and everything. So it's
Yeah,
interesting that it was filmed before it too.
Well, one of the things, one of my sort of rites of passage was, I was like probably the mid 1990s, late 1990s, like a lot of kids, get your hands on these crazy VHS tapes, and they have, Faces of Death, whatever it is. Like that's all mostly fake, but there's some stuff out there that was like these little taboo videos, and you go and you get beers, and one day I was watching one of these with some heavy metal friends of mine, and I saw someone die on camera. Like, it was news footage from South America, and I just clicked. So I'm never ever watching that again. And to this day, I actually don't watch any viral videos of real violence, because it just shook me to my core. Not only that you're witnessing a life lost, but that someone was sticking their camera right in the person's face. I was like, okay, because when you're a young dude and you're some skateboard, hardcore metalhead, whatever, there's something that's not quite formed in you. And shit, did it form in me immediately. Like my special effects makeup artist, like I used to do makeup effects, so I had to do some research here and there, and you explore, terrible things that happen to the human body. But now I know it enough, and I let other people do that, and I keep a very fictional focus, because I certainly, I figured if I let all that, in this day and age, the access to real violence is, I think, more than was ever intended for our intellects to process. So I'm sheltered, and I'm so actually affected by it that I doubled down and did Hold the Dark. And the reason is I found like a redemption in it. It's so dark and violent and awful and cold, but if you go real deep down to it, because of the human-animal connection, I started to see, okay, this is about, Russell Crowe is a passive protagonist. He's not in there diffusing bombs and like getting from A to B to C to D. He's just sort of there. He's here to help, but really to observe. And sometimes the power of non-intervention is as effective as anything else. Not easy to do cinematically, but thematically I thought it was very important. And I found that like if I can tune out the horrible things that us humans are doing to each other every day, because you just can't shelter yourself from it. It's all we hear about. Is that maybe I could find forgiveness, and if we liken our behavior to animals, it's impulsive, it's instinctual, it's sometimes violent and protective. It makes a lot more sense to me. So with Hold the Dark, I was like, okay, it's quite literal at times, with the iconography and the visuals, like, not only are we wolves, and animals, sometimes the wolves are more civil than humans. So it just allowed me to step back and watch all of this mayhem take place. But as I say, it's to be familiar with it, but not to understand it. And I found it pretty cathartic, actually, to kind of let it happen, observe it, and not judge humans as much as I was, because we are just animals.
Yeah, I think that's what I personally love so much. About this film, but all your films, is that I think no matter kind of what's going on screen, I'm forced to reconcile with the idea that, like, perhaps, the extent that I would go if I was faced with a challenging situation, as a human, as an animal, whatever it might be further than you'd like to admit to yourself. And I think, kind of at its core, that's a really empathetic message. It's a really kind of hopeful thing to kind of have to strip everything away and, like, look at life in that way and relate to things that way. So oddly enough, I don't know, I did find kind of what you were talking about, some nuggets of hope in this film, and this to kind of have like an empathetic message underneath.
Well, good. I'm glad I reached you.
Yes. Did anybody else have maybe one more question?
Yeah, real life aside, that was the coolest shootout scene in recent memory.
Oh, so good.
Oh, thank you. That was, one of the few things we were so like we knew how tough that would be to photograph and tackle on set. So we really prepped the hell out of it. I mean, that was the first time in my career I didn't have any regrets coming out of it. We had just enough time to do it. We had 5 days. It went to 6. Every shot was storyboarded, pre-visualized in a sort of 3D virtual world. Stunt rehearsals, deciding where every single bullet hit goes. Really dialed it in. I thank you for noticing, because that was, I'm pretty proud of that from a technical standpoint. And also, it serves to like just be this unrelenting, brutal experience for the audience that hopefully gives them that sort of sensation of surviving something when it's finally over. Like it's Q&A. No. It's just going in. I won't stop until you stop me.
I was just gonna say, so would you say, like, what else might have Medora been saving her son from? Like, just the darkness in general, like being in that area and those people, or?
Okay, so one of the things that we pulled back from in the novel was the relationship between Vernon, or the adaptation, Vernon and Medora. Now, I don't want to spell it out, but people are tuning into it here and there, and they're getting it, but I'm not going to make you watch it again. But if one were to watch it again and really pay attention to what Medora is saying when she describes Vernon, like, you might come across a revelation there.
I think so are they like related? Okay,
Yeah.
because I noticed the one guy mentioned, like, you look like her, you have the same eyes, you have the same hair, and she also said, I've known him my whole life. And so I was just thinking, like,
There you go.
yeah.
That's what we pull back, is again, it's also very rare, because if you tested this movie with the studio audience, because I'm the same way. When I watch a movie, I wouldn't say it's superficial, but I have a hard time distinguishing between who's who sometimes when they cast a lot of, white dudes with brown hair. I'm like, whoa, whatever it might be. It's hard to find anything, but we designed every line. It's sort of just, we're taking a tour through the village. And I'm just, we're shooting the shit about, my missing son. But it's really it's all there and worked in. And but it's cool that as soon as I triggered it, you're like, I know what it is, because it is all there. But we asked people to lean in and try to figure it out. Because when we did spell it out, we had that on camera. It just fell flat. It was like this, I didn't want Core to be like, bingo. It's lost the mystery. And it was later in the film, so it almost felt like it was supposed to be this huge twist. And it didn't feel right. It felt too jammed in. But then we went back and made sure that we set it up in these little moments. So then hopefully, maybe not in the first viewing, but the second or third, be like, oh yeah, of course they're brother and sister. And that sort of paints as to what Medora might be doing as far as, and we hinted their cursed bloodline and this Nordic, these intruders in the indigenous land, and sort of, maybe they are cursed, maybe they aren't, who knows.
I know. Well, I think that's probably about all the time we have today. I appreciate you taking it so long with us today. This was a real treat.
I appreciate it.
I'm so glad, I think we're all so glad this film was able to get made, and we can't wait to see what you have in store for us next.
Cool. Thank you all very much for coming out, and thanks for having me.
All right.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Thank you.